I didn't quite finish that whole video just because it's a whole minute and something long, and I didn't want to take too much time, but I don't even know what that video has to do with anything that I do for this channel, except looking through books and movies, but it sure puts a smile on my face. So I figured what a great way to start one of my live streams. If you're wondering, yes, those were all my pets. Right now, the only one I probably didn't feature on there is Squeaky because he's new to the family, but there's Spooky on there. Jazzy is the dog. Edward's the rooster, and then all the hens that I used to have, Eddie, Pound Cake, Shoe, and all the girls, Cool Ranch, Angel, Honey, Coco. We had so many chickens. So moving on. I'm going to go back into Ready Player One today. And most of it's going to be covering the book part, and mainly because so much more happens in the book than what happens in the movie. I mean, the movie skips a lot of drama and a lot of timeline. In the movie, it almost seems like everything happens in like one day. I mean, from all three keys, all three gates, the drama with Sorrento, the relationship with Artemis, everything. But in the book, I mean, this thing takes a time period of like years, not just from the time that Halliday dies till when they find the first key, but even after Percival finds the first key, he actually starts a relationship with Artemis, and then they break up. And it's like a year goes by before the next thing happens. So bear with me, okay? So we're going to get more into the nitty-gritty of the book and what it says. The movie is going to be kind of hard to align with it because, like I said, it doesn't really align that well. I'm going to share my screen. And before I go into the book, I'll show you the website where I'm looking up the reading for this, okay? So let's go to share screen. It's easier with two monitors. Oh my gosh. I don't know why, but my my cat just jumped up on the table, which is why it shook around. But my StreamYard also reset everything. So I have to kind of start from scratch. So here's the Tunnel of Hell with all of me from start to finish. And I will take you over to my browser. So my Bing is what automatically opens up, but I go to the website. It's basically freenovelread.com. You can see it right here up at the top. Okay. Whether it's www.freenovelread, Free Novel Read right here. That's the website I go to. And you have all these new releases, genres. You can go up here and you can pick from any one of these topics: horror, fantasy, mystery, suspense. It's great. Or if you have one in mind, you can see the ones that I have searched all through here. Ready Player One, and then you hit enter. And then here you have Ready Player One, published in 2012 by Ernest Cline, right? And then they have other ones that will kind of relate to your search. So here's where I found Ready Player Two. The number is the IBN number for reference, but you can read the whole thing. And then usually I just click on here and voila. To flip the page, you have next or previous, and the same buttons are down at the bottom. So hopefully that helps you guys. Let's get back to where I left off. First and foremost, let me apologize for my last video about Ready Player One. I gave you guys the whole speech about the first key and talked about it, and I kept referring to it as the jade key. The first key is the copper key, according to the book. It's the copper key, then the jade key, and then the crystal key. And I don't know why, but I noticed one of my titles on the last live stream about this said jade key, and I'm like, was it the jade key? I thought it was the copper key that he found on Ludus. So basically, on the last video, I did refer to Ogden Morrow, funny guy, and I found the part in the book where he dogs the newscaster. So he's telling this reporter, that he doesn't like IOI or something like that. And the reporter says something. He's like, too bad, I do. And the reporter gets uncomfortable, clears his throat again, and says, moving on. And he says, do you have any predictions about what changes we might see, right? And he's betting that the other 8 empty slots will fill up pretty quickly. And the reporter's like, oh, why do you think so? And he said, one person can keep a secret, but not 2, because he's referring to Parzival and H. So obviously, after Parzival finds the first key, he shares that information with his best friend H right away, and H finds it. Okay. And then obviously Artemis does. And then all of a sudden, they don't know who or how or why, but Daito and Shoto end up getting the key as well. Nobody knows who Daito and Shoto are, except that Parzival can only assume that they are working together because Daito and Shoto are the names of a dual sword set. So obviously these 2 guys are together. They found the key at the same time. Here you have the high five. Okay. That's where the high five comes off, because the name kicks off, because they are the first 5 people to find the key. After that, it's all IOI numbers, right? And so the Ogden Morrow is telling this reporter that, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I am sure of one thing. The Sixers, now you got to remember, Ogden Morrow don't like IOI, and they call them the Sixers as well. The Sixers are going to use every dirty trick in their disposal to learn the location of the copper key in the first gate. And then the reporter's like, you're referring to the employees of Innovative Online Industries? Like your typical CNN reporter, right? And he goes, yes, IOI, the Sixers. I guess Sixers is kind of a derogatory term for IOI employees. And obviously we saw that in the movie too. And he said their sole purpose is to exploit loopholes in the contest rules and subvert the intention of Jim's will. The very soul of the Oasis is at stake here. And the last thing Jim would want to have, would have wanted, is for his creation to fall into the hands of a fascist, multinational conglomerate like IOI. He is just kicking them in the dirt. And this is when the reporter's like, Mr. Morrow, IOI owns this network. And he is the best retort. He goes, of course they do. He goes, they own practically everything, including you, pretty boy. I mean, did they tattoo the UPC code on your ass when they hired you and sit there and spout their corporate propaganda? That is a great line. I mean, that is just a true corporate owner telling, this dogged industry of bankers, basically screw you. So of course, the reporter begins to stutter, glances nervously off camera, and then Morrow calls him out in the best fashion ever. Quick, you better cut me off before I say anything else. And then he starts laughing. So he took a few seconds to regroup and thanks him again. Morrow, unfortunately, that's all we have time to speak with him today. Right? So that, I want to say, is probably my favorite part of the book in Ready Player One. It was just great. So anyways, we're going to move off of that subject and get on to the drama. The drama. All right. So once Parzival and H find the copper key, and Artemis and all them, everybody suddenly in the world is able to see it on the HUD scoreboard, right? Everybody's able to see their names, and it's their avatar names. Now, let's back up one step and ask ourselves about Parzival's name, because last time I told you he attends school on a planet called Ludus. In Ludus, you're not allowed to use your avatar's name like Parzival and H. Although it's easy to assume that anybody at a certain age below 18 years old is attending school on Ludus, because that's the only place where school can be attended. So when they register for school, you're required to give your name, your address, your social security number and all this, and you are assigned a student name, a student avatar name, which is not usually your real name. It's like, student 185 or something like that. So Parzival is not known as Parzival at school. However, the school has confidential files that can direct him, connect him to his student name and that he's a student. Now, Remember in the other video, I mentioned to you that there was a character named IROC that Parzival didn't like, but H allowed him into her chat room, the basement, and they would come down there and kind of just dog each other, right? So nobody thinks anything of IROC except the fact that they know that IROC goes to school on Ludus because he's like 13 years old. IROC also knows that Parzival and H attend school on Ludus as well. They are all within the same group, okay? Putting two and two together, once Parzival and H, two people that IROC knows, and we all know that IROC is kind of a douchebag by reading the novel, he, of course, starts putting out posts, public posts, that he knows Parzival from school. He knows that Parzival is a student on Ludus. But amongst the hundreds of posts of assuming people that, claim they know Parzival or had met Parzival once, or, all these clues, it's kind of hard to know what to believe, right? So IROC starts putting out these posts. H and Parzival kind of talk about it like, is this something we should be worried about? H is kind of like, not. So there was, like you see here, right here, of course, he had no way of proving that he really knew us. Okay. So they kind of blow it off that it's not that big of a deal. And they just kind of like hope that nobody really takes him seriously. So after that, Parzival and obviously H and everybody else start getting bombarded because even though they haven't found the Easter egg yet, they are instant celebrities. Because after years and years and years of searching amongst thousands and hundreds of thousands of Gunters who failed to find the first key, Parzival is the number one guy who found the first key. So a lot of businesses and marketing agents start reaching out to him, asking him to endorse products. Kind of like being a famous basketball player. They start endorsing products. You get hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars just for endorsing it. So this instant celebrity status gives Wade Watts like all this money. However, let's see. Let me go ahead and close this out. If my lighting looks weird, it's because I'm using my television lighting to let you see me, but I've got advertisements that pop up and I'll just skip through those. So now that Parzival is celebrity status and he's getting all these offers, he's getting an offer from IOI as well, because IOI wants to know how he found the first key. Not only that, since he found the first key, they expect that he will likely be able to help them find the second and the third key, because eventually IOI wants the Easter egg, right? Just like Ogden Morrow says, they want to be the heir of the biggest benefactor of all, Oasis. So Nolan Sorrento, he's supposed to be the big bad guy in this book, and he is in the movie too. You don't see anything about Nolan Sorrento very much before as a person in the movie. But in the book, it kind of introduces him way back as the lead of IOI's Avatar team. So he sends a private invitation to Wade Watts. Now, Wade Watts is a total Gunter. He's not going to betray the Gunters. I mean, IOI is enemy number one, right? But he's curious and he's kind of like wondering. And you get this gut feeling from reading the novel, like, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't go meet with this guy because he's bad news. He's the bad guy. He's the enemy. But Wade Watts is young. He's stupid. He can't shake that he should at least see what the guy has to say. And it turns out to be the biggest mistake he ever made. So he shows up and he talks to Sorrento, and Sorrento says, look, IOI has asked me to propose to you that you come work for us and we will make you rich. We will give you celebrity status. We will pay you out the ass. You will be, infinitely head honcho here. And Wade Watts goes a step further. Of course, he's mocking Sorrento. And he basically says, if you see here, he says, okay, count me in, sign me up, whatever you guys call it, I'm in. And Sorrento's like, really? And not only that, then Wade Watts, or Parzival, he basically says, but I have 3 conditions. First of all, I want $50 million bonus when I find the eggs for you guys, the egg for you guys, right? Not 25. So that's part of the, he doubles the amount to be paid. He said, is that doable? And of course, Sorrento's like, done. What are the other conditions? And then he starts sticking it to Nolan Sorrento. He's like, I want to be second in command. I want your job. I want to be in charge of the whole shebang, chief of operations, el numero uno, right? And so Sorrento's smile kind of vanishes, and he knows the kid's kind of jacking with him. And then Sorrento says, what else? And Parzival finally gives him the finger and says, I don't want to work with you. You give me the creeps. But if your superiors are willing to fire your ass and give me your position, I'm in. It's a done deal. And guess what? They agree to it. But then, of course, Wade Watts says, you know what? I'm kidding. I'm out. Screw you guys. Right? That's when the tune changed drastically, because that's when Sorrento tells him this is serious. And then he calls him Wade, right? During their conversation, which stops Parzival in his tracks, because nobody's supposed to know his real name is Wade. Nobody. How does this guy know his name? It's scary as shit. So what actually happened was Nolan Sorrento did a little digging around, figured out that Wade Watts, or Parzival, must be a student on Ludus, or had been recently. He paid off an administrator at Ludus, one of the school administrators, and got the confidential files, not just on Wade, but on everybody else, H as well. So we could only assume that Sorrento knows everybody's true identity. So let's go on to the next one here. Right here is where Sorrento says, sit down, Wade. I froze. Had he just used my real name? So that was a pretty tense moment, right? So, but by then, I'm just going to go back to this screen real quick. By then, Wade's got the bells and whistles going. He's scared. And of course, he should be, because that is when Sorrento turns it around and says, instead of all that, how about you help us find the egg, or else we go and bomb the stacks where your aunt lives and where you're at. He assumes that Wade Watts is in the trailer in the stacks on Oasis there, but he doesn't know that Wade has that. Remember that van I told you about, where he operates inside the abandoned van at the bottom of the car pile? So he doesn't know that Wade is there, but he threatens to kill Wade and everybody in the stacks by blowing it up, because he's already called him out on knowing his true name and location. Wade gets a little scared, but he basically refuses him and hopes that the guy is just bluffing. So he logs out and leaves, and Sorrento tries to tell him not to, but he does, and then he sits and waits. A few minutes go by and he figures nothing happened, so I guess I'm okay. And then all of a sudden he hears the explosion from that far away. I mean, he's a couple miles away from the stacks. And he goes out, he goes running, and he sees the whole turmoil of the stacks burning, not just his aunt, but everybody in that entire section, including the lady that was nice to him, Miss Gilmore or something like that. So Wade is very shaken up. I mean, he's a kid, he's alone, and he's scared now, and he's got nowhere to go. So he goes back to his van, and he immediately reaches out to H, his best friend. And he said, look, shit just got real, right? Basically, he has this conversation with H, and he tells H, you have to assume that they know your location. They know mine. They just did this. H can't believe it. They start gathering their wits and just figuring it like, okay, let's think about this. And then he tells H, listen, H, Sorrento said that your school records contained a fake home address and that they don't know where to find you, but he might have been lying. You should leave home, right? So he's trying to warn H, and H is like fearless. He's like, don't worry about me, Z. I stay mobile. Those bastards will never find me. And there's a story to that later on, where H, when Parzival finds out that H is actually not a guy, but a black female, that a black female lesbian at that, that not only doesn't live at home, but has been on her own in a traveling RV, which you also see in the movie, but you don't know why. And so that's when H kind of explains her identity was created by her mother in, I think, Texas. And her mother, when she was going through school, had this complex that, you know what, a black female doesn't stand a chance against the white male propaganda thing. So she put forth H's fake name, fake identity, fake gender, fake race when she registered H for school. But then in later years, when H came out of the closet, her mother didn't want anything to do with her and kicked her out. So with what she could and best she could, she got an RV and has been living in it for a couple years. And the RV has like a remote to where she can log on to Oasis, kind of like using Wi-Fi. So that's H's story. And that's why H is not worried one bit, because she's traveling the world. She's not staying in one place where Sorrento can find her. But that's not to assume that Sorrento doesn't know where Artemis is and where Daito and Shoto are. And this is how they end up killing Daito later. So then H has an idea. They want to fight the Sixers. Now that H and Parzival have talked about how Sorrento had tried to buy Wade out, they're probably going to try to buy out H and Artemis and Daito and Shoto. So H says, I have an idea. Let's call a meeting here in my chat room, the basement. So they do, and they talk to Daito, Shoto. They meet them in Avatar version for the first time. And so Artemis is there, and of course, Parzival, this is the second time he's seen her. He's getting a little like, ooh. Anyways, so they move on to having a conversation about what to do and how things unraveled with Sorrento and Parzival. So all the rest of them, Artemis, Daito, Shoto, are insistent that they would never, don't even answer the email, is basically what Parzival's trying to tell them. Don't even, because this is what he's going to say and this is what he did to me. So they all agree. But then H kind of like throws out there, now here's the thing. Gunters have their cultures, right? There are some Gunters that only work alone. In Daito and Shoto's case, they will only work with each other. There are some Gunters that work in guilds and groups. However, certain Gunters don't like that. And it's almost like H wanted to propose that they all work together, but Daito shoots it down because he says right here, I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just stating facts as I see them. And Daito says, good, because it sounded like you were about to propose some sort of alliance. And that's where they kind of have not a falling out, but just kind of like, all right, thanks for the info. I got to go. So they didn't, H kind of calls Daito out. You know, a second ago, you admitted needing Parzival's help in the Tomb of Horrors, you know, that's where they found the first key. And then Daito's like, nope, only Daito, you know, Shoto and I only work with each other. And, you know, then they go on. They disappear. Artemis is like, well, you know, call me if you need anything, but I got to go too. So that whole alliance thing didn't go over right out of the gates. It takes them a while before they actually start to work with each other. So I'm back on this one so that I can move on to the next phase, which is Ogden Morrow's birthday party. After this meeting in H's basement chat room, Parzival and Artemis start doing that whole texting thing, like, what's up, girl? How you doing? And they start flirting. There's whole like 2 pages about how he feels when she texts him. You know, it's like a private text. It's not anywhere that anybody can see. And he's just like reaffirming how much he likes her. And like he starts telling himself that he's in love with her. And he's just getting all googly eyed. And then they get this invitation, right? It's a invitation to Ogden Morrow's birthday party. And since they are the high five, of course they want celebrities at this party. And apparently, since Ogden Morrow is a multi-billionaire and co-owner of Oasis, it's gonna be crazy, right? And they're just excited. So Parzival asked Artemis if she's going to go, and she's like, yeah. So they decide it's going to be a date. It's their first date, right? And in the book, Parzival says, until I blew it. And I'm like, oh, great. So just to back up and say, in the movie, I don't even remember in the movie how they ended up at the dance club, but I do remember it didn't annotate or say anything about that dance being part of Ogden Morrow's birthday. It was just like this dance club that they went to. But the description of the place was almost identical. It was a giant gravity-free zone where people do the floating dancing thing, right? Same if instant happened, it gets rated by IOI. And I do remember that in the movie, IROC had something to do with it, and he was listening in on Wade and Artemis' conversation. That never happened in the book. IROC had nothing to do with that. In fact, he doesn't even really come into play in the book again until I think he's only mentioned something in the book at first in H's basement, and then later on where he's claiming that he knows Parzival. After that, you really don't hear from him again. And so in the movie, he's listening in. He hears Wade say that his first name is Wade. And then he does some investigating to figure out that it's Wade Watts. And that's how Nolan Sorrento finds out his true identity in the movie, which doesn't even mention anything about Nolan Sorrento paying off the school administrator. So they kind of took a different avenue to find the same result. And ironically, in the movie, they go to the dance first and the stacks get blown up later. In the book, the stacks get blown up, and that's when Parzival starts signing endorsements to get money so that he could support himself since he has no place to live anymore. And then he ends up going to this birthday party dance with Artemis. Unfortunately, when they go to the dance, oh, I have a clip for you. So I don't know if I should be playing the sound on this, so I'm going to mute it. But this is basically the part in the movie where they go to the dance. And just note that in the book, Artemis is described differently. She has her long, dark hair. She's more curvaceous. And in the book, her dress is described as the blue scale-plated armor that looks like it was painted on. And he said she looked absolutely fabulous, which she looks fabulous here too. He says in the book that he just spent hours trying to tweak his avatar so that, he has different hair and the outfit. And of course, they're doing this cute dance move. I think it's adorable. So the book has its perks, but so does the movie. I'm not going to lie. I like this part in the movie very much. And of course, they start a thing, right? You guys have to see the movie if you haven't seen it already. It is fun to watch. Everybody else is like, look at these two. Now, in the book, they do have the dancing, but it's very private. It's not anything like where everybody's watching them. They go out there, they're dancing, and they start having this conversation in the book where Parzival starts telling her how he feels about her. And then the mistake that he makes is he tells her that he loves her. And this kind of stops her dead in her tracks because she tells him, I love this part of the book. This boy is just losing his mind. If anybody ever tells you that a girl can't be manipulative, or they don't know what they're doing to a boy, they're lying, because I do this to my husband all the time. And I know what he's thinking. So I think it's cute. So here, we'll just pause that because, oh no, that I don't like the look on her face there. There we go. So here is where in the book, Wade also tells her in this private conversation while they're dancing that he loves her. And she said, "Don't say that," and they have this little kind of a prelude to an argument saying, "You can't love me. You don't know me. You don't know anything about me." And he says, "Why do you say that?" She says, "Because I'm hideously deformed, or I'm a paraplegic, or I'm actually a 63-year-old, And she said, "Take your pick." He said, "I don't care if you're all three of those things. Tell me where to meet you and I'll prove it," right? He's in love with her. Parzival is in love with Artemis for her mind and her spirit and all the things that love should be. And he said, "I'll get on a plane right now and fly to wherever you are," right? And she shakes her head. She's afraid because everybody knows later on, it doesn't show in the video because I think she hides it, but she has that birthmark on one side of her face. It doesn't show it in the movie. I don't think it says anything in the book really about a birthmark on her avatar until later. So that's her secret. She's got this red birthmark on half her face, which I've had friends that had that. It's really not that big of a deal. But anyways, this conversation escalates, right? And she finally says, "Look, I think we're getting a little too serious. I think we need to slow down." And he's like, "You're breaking up with me?" And she's like, "No, just need to kind of put a pin in it, basically, right? Until the hunt is over," right? And she said, he's like, "To hell with the competition and the egg. Did you hear what I said? I'm in love with you," right? So to Parzival, this is more important. But to Artemis, it's kind of like she's using it as an excuse to kind of put a little distance between them. And so she tells him, "Let's just back off until the egg hunt is over." And he's like flabbergasted. He's like, "That could be years," right? So he's brokenhearted. And he even says that could take years, right? So they're basically getting into this separation thing, and then all of a sudden IOI breaks in, and all hell breaks loose. The Sixers, they come in, they start raiding the place. Now you have to bear in mind, in the book, when they go to this dance, I forgot to mention, Nolan Sorrento thinks that Wade Watts is dead because they blew up the stacks and Wade Watts is supposed to be there. To avoid having more aggression and more of a manhunt toward Parzival, in the Oasis, Parzival kind of gets into a disguise, and so does Artemis. All the high five do just to kind of play it safe so that Nolan Sorrento and the Sixers do not like pursue them in Oasis and attack them. So in this, the IOIs attacking Ogden Morrow's party, this is kind of like a high profile event that they had discussed whether or not they should even go because it's going to put them back on the radar. Well, apparently it did, and that's how IOI and why IOI raided the party, because they were coming after Wade Watts and Artemis. So he even says here, "I knew my own recklessness had brought them down on us, and I cursed myself for being foolish." So for a while, he was laying low. He was supposed to be dead, and now they know he's alive again. So they have this huge breakup, and now how much time do I have? How much time am I at? I'm at 34 minutes, so I don't want to drag this on too long. I try to keep them all at half an hour, but let's stick a pin in it right here, because after this point, this is where the long separation between Artemis and Parzival starts, and it's like almost a year that they are apart. In the movie, I mean, they just have a little squabble, but things move on 2 minutes later. And I get it, but there's a whole lot that happens and a whole lot of changes that happens with Wade Watts that's important in the book. I mean, he practically becomes a slave to IOI. I bet you didn't know that in the movie, right? So I'm going to go ahead and close these. And I will go ahead and stop sharing, and I will end this part right here. But maybe I'll cut it off here and then pull up some more pages and do another video segment in just a few minutes so that you guys can just break it down into your 30-minute marks and move from there. But I'll talk more about the year that Parzival lives alone and basically some of the stuff he goes through with H and Daito and Shoto and finding the other keys. Obviously, right now, they still only have one key. So they still have two more to go. So I'll continue that a little later, guys. But thanks for joining me. And, you know, if you're taking notes, great. If you're into it, if you're doing a book report, hey, great. I encourage you to read the book still because immersing yourself in the first book was really great. I mean, the second book was a little difficult. I mean, there were so many details, but the first book, well worth the read on your own. Even though I'm telling you as many details as I can't tell you everything. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for listening. I started coining the term nerdy birdies just because it just started coming out. So if you don't like it, I mean, just whatever. I'll see you on the next video, guys. Thanks so much.